The House on the Rock. There was once a man of good fortune. He had many things in his name, but longed to have a house of his own. As he walked the village, he saw a piece of land surrounded by trees and closed in by shrubs.
"What a beautiful piece of land,"
said the man. He kicked his feet in the dirt and stamped the ground. He would have to do a lot of work in order to make the land worthwhile for a house. Just then he heard a hammer of a pickaxe and peered through the bushes. Not far from the new land he had just seen was another man swinging his pickaxe into the ground.
"Hey, what are you doing?"
called Jack. The man put down his axe and walked over toward Jack, wiping the sweat off his brow.
"Nice to meet you. I'm Caleb. Are you the new owner of the plot over there?"
Caleb pointed to the piece of land Jack had just been admiring.
"Not yet,"
said Jack.
"but I plan to buy it tomorrow. I want to build a house for myself and my new bride." "Great piece of land,"
said Caleb.
"I looked at it before I bought mine over here, but decided against it." "Oh?"
asked Jack.
"Too many trees?" "Nah, the trees are great, but it needed a lot of work. The topsoil is soft and loose. I would have to dig down for weeks before finding the rock beneath to lay the foundation for a house. I work on my own, you see, and cannot afford to hire any help, and it would take me too long. So I chose this piece of land. By tomorrow, I'll be ready to lay the foundation because the bedrock is higher."
Jack turned and looked at his land. It was beautiful, and the view would be astounding. He turned and looked at Caleb's land.
"You have workers, no doubt,"
said Caleb, seeing the concern on Jack's face and not wanting to ruin his plans.
"I'm sure your helpers will make easy work of it. But if you're on your own, there is another piece of land not far over. The bedrock is higher there too, so you shouldn't need to work very long before you can lay your foundations too." Thanks,"
said Jack. The men waved goodbye, and Jack walked a few minutes more until he came to the piece of land that Caleb had told him about. There weren't many trees, and the plot wasn't as attractive as the first piece of land. Jack would not have the views he had hoped for, and though the bedrock may have been higher, he preferred the first plot. He would have to work harder for longer, but he thought it would be worth it. The next morning, Jack went to the village council and purchased the land beside Caleb, the land with the trees and the best view. With tools in hand, he began working his way down to a foundation. Jack worked from sun-up to sundown for 2 weeks, but found that he was no closer than when he had started.
"How goes it?"
asked Caleb, having taken a break in his work.
"You were right,"
said Jack.
"I've been at it for weeks, and still no rock."
Caleb nodded his head, not knowing what to say, considering that he had told Jack of the work he would need to do.
"How long till you're done?"
asked Jack.
My structure is up. I'll be laying bricks tomorrow, and getting the roof on after. I should be about done in a few weeks."
Jack looked over at the piles of sand he had just dug up, and wished he was as close to the end as Caleb was.
"Well, back to work,"
said Caleb, and off he went back to his project. After another week, Jack had still not reached any rock solid enough for a foundation. But seeing how far down he had already dug, he decided that even if there was no rock, the depth on its own would suffice. He knocked in his frames and piled in the sides with all the sand he had.
"That'll do,"
he said.
"She may not have hit the bottom, but she does go down pretty far."
Happy with his progress, Jack continued building his house. He laid his bricks with mortar, plastered the outside, used the best wood for his door, and covered his roof with the best tin he could find.
It's coming along great,
said Caleb, coming over with some water to share with his new neighbor.
I'm sure it felt like you'd never get there, but I must say how impressed I am at how quickly you were able to get this built after all the digging you had to do for your foundation. Yeah,
said Jack, knowing full well he had stopped before he should have. But as he stared up at the magnificent building, he assured himself that it would do just fine. Months later, the two men and their families, now good friends, shared a meal together. The wives chatted, the children played together, and the men talked late into the night.
We best be going,
said Jack.
Looks like the rain is coming soon, and we'd hate to have to be outside when the storm hits.
The families said their goodbyes and left each other. Caleb bolted his door and turned out the lights. That night, the storm raged. The rain hit hard against the houses. It pelted loudly on the tin roofs and beat against the walls. The wind howled, willing itself into the homesteads. But Caleb and his family slept cozily in their beds.
Jack! Jack!
Jack woke in a fright at the sound of his wife's voice.
There is water! Hurry!
Jack swung his legs off the bed and landed in water that was ankle deep.
How?
He thought, looking up at the ceiling. He ran through the house, eyes turned upward, hunting the leak he needed to mend. The water rose higher. His children and wife cried out. Desperate to find the problem, Jack checked the windows and the doors as the storm raged on relentlessly.
Where is the water coming from?
Cried Jack, unable to see what needed fixing. Suddenly, the sound of snapping wood rung through the air.
The trees are being struck by lightning!
He shouted out, but as he looked out the windows, all he saw was the waving of branches being pulled to and fro in the violent wind. No tree came crashing towards them.
Jack, what's happening?
Called out his wife, unable to calm their crying children. Before he could answer, the house shuddered violently. Jack lost his balance and fell into the water that very nearly covered him entirely. What was that in his hands?
Sand,
said Jack, mortified.
The house is sinking.
He sprang up as fast as he could and rushed to get his family. Grabbing whatever they could to cover themselves, Jack hastily ushered his family outside. The wind and lightning had stopped, but the rain torrented down on them. Huddled beneath the tree, Jack watched as his house sank deeper and deeper into the ground. The wooden frame bowed and snapped as the weight of the rain pummeled the homestead until it collapsed in a pile on the ground. By morning, all that was left was a heap of materials and a very cold family.
Jack! Jack! Is everyone all right?
Called out Caleb as he ran toward them. Caleb stared in horror as he took in the sight of his dear friend's home, now a mess on the ground.
We're here,
said Jack, as he and his family walked out from under the trees. Caleb quickly helped them back to his place.
Are you and your family all right? It was a storm I have never seen before. Took the house right out from under us. We're okay,
said Caleb. Jack stared in disbelief at the sight of Caleb's house.
Just a broken window here and there, a leak or two, but we're all safe and warm. Come in.
Caleb's house looked as though it had been hit with a wet broom. But that's all. It stood resolute and sturdy. Jack hung his head in shame. Had he not been in such a hurry, he too could have boasted a safe and dry family.
You're some kind of boulder, Caleb,
said Jack.
Nah, not really.
Said Caleb as he looked at his slightly injured house.
Just a solid foundation.